Look at the gays doing a bit of redecorating while we're... Couldn't help it. Move the mic stand, move the leg too.
All those gorgeous smiles.
Yes, I know. What a great turnout. You're all hearing me okay at the back? Yes? Amazing too?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. I just want to say, as a newishly out gay man, found this just such a compelling chronicle that almost never was, right? So it captures your experience, Peter, of being an immigrant, of being gay, about a prolonged sense of displacement and occasional loneliness in your life, which you write about. And all that as death came knocking a few times. There was the bombing raids during World War II. There was the landmine that took a friend of yours, very nearly took you. There was the car crash where the family car flipped over. And then there was your pram that accidentally rolled into a canal. In many ways, you shouldn't be here.
But I am.
But you are. And as if to test fate, there was this bold embrace of risk throughout your life. You do write about some risky behaviour, but some of those risks led you to some of your biggest loves in your life. And I think the timelessness of your story calls us to reflect on how we define home, character, legacy, and to remember that even in the darkest times, we should honour and remember people such as you, who long before Gloria Gaynor was saying, "Oh no, not I will survive." And you've done more than survive, you've thrived. Peter, I want to begin with your childhood, where you recall World War II, you recall the bombs falling, and you recall a sense of displacement. What did that do to shape your character?
It's left me with a trauma of feeling very quickly abandoned. And there's always making new friendships. There's always that sense of, will this friend abandon me? I try to not think of it, but it's there. But I also think that sense has made me, in a way, a really strong person. I've had to learn to survive. And I think I have. Well, I'm 86 and I'm still here. Again, to use it, I suppose, a common term, it was character building in a way. I had to find ways of living or surviving in a world where survival was really very difficult. And
I always think about how character modelling is so important for young children, that, there's this basic idea that you can't be what you can't see. You didn't have many models growing up, and you wrote in the book about your father. I longed for him to cuddle me, to pick me up, to tell me he loved me. But the diaries that were left showed me he simply didn't know how. They contained no emotion. What principles, in the absence of a character to model yourself on, what principles did you use to form your own character?
I think my mother was the total opposite. And I think it was my mother actually who was my unusually, fathers usually can be role models in many instances. My mother was my role model of being generous, even in difficult times, of just one example. In those days, housewives, mothers used to go shopping every day, and she would walk through the street going to Greengrocer maybe and see some person in the street, and she would say, "Hello, how are you?" Total stranger. And next they'd be home for coffee. And, you know, there was a good circle of friends. And I think that made me survive. That was my role.
There's a theme in this book that I see over and over again. It's about what home is defined to be. You crave a sense of home and stability, and yet it seems elusive at times. There was a time when you returned to The Hague and realised that was no longer your home, and then you were in Melbourne and you kind of felt at home, but it was you were displaced, and it was the same in Sydney when you moved here with Bob. When you look back on your life now, when did you feel most at home, and what did home mean? Because it's clearly not a place.
I learned to feel at home once I'd met Bob, and it took a long time for me to trust him because of my background with my father. But once I did, he became everything. And being an immigrant, someone had told me that once you get old in Australia, and if you have your own home, no matter what, you will survive. And so there was that drive of having a home. And once we got a home, the home, that was it, to put a key in our own door and to enter it and to be in a space that was safe, that was away from all that horrible stuff I've described in my talk. It felt like a sanctuary.
But it didn't end there, because it also became a home to other people. And you understood their displacement.
Yeah. It was just something about, and I think again, my mother being the kind of role model, inviting people into your home. And it's your home where you make friends, where you retain friends, where you resolve issues, where you comfort each other, and that's home.
Now, there was a particular anecdote in the book about a date night with a particular man, and I actually gasped out loud when I read this book. And some of you may know the story. I certainly didn't. It was a man named David Connolly. And I'm going to read a passage here, and I'm going to get you to take over. When David told me of his profession, I was shocked. It called into doubt the possibility of something more permanent. While the emotional connection and my lust was still there, my lack of confidence about how to go about a real relationship, combined with the perceived incongruence of a secret homosexual life and David's role, made it seem less real. Why don't you tell everyone why that relationship that you wanted with David never came to pass?
There are a couple of reasons. So early in life, although I was brought up as a Catholic, I learned a Latin Mass to sing, and I still remember some Latin. I have no idea what the words mean, but I can sing it. I can listen to it. But I got to a stage, and I think it was more when I've always known I was different, but I couldn't put a label or a word to it. I knew I was different. But once I started to realize that my sexuality was different compared to the other boys at school, and there was something about religion that just didn't gel.
And the problem was that David was
he was a clergyman.
I know, right? Exactly. At
a beat we met, Alva Road in St Kilda. Wow, it was an extraordinary moment. was something in the air that night. So I'm not sure now if he invited me to his home or I invited him to mine.
Okay, the way you tell it in the book was that he invited you to his home.
Yeah.
You turned up there, and someone else answered the door. It was his housemate.
So there was Paul in brown corduroy trousers, had a business shirt on, no tie, had a his eyes were just, he had beautiful hazel-colored eyes, wow. I caught those eyes, and there was a spark there. But there was also, for Bon, he later recalls in the checkerboard program, he was asked, how did it start? And Bon says, it went just bang. For me, because of my background with my father and feeling quickly abandoned, it took me about 6 months to believe that I could have this relationship.
I want to fast forward here only because we're running out of time. I'm literally prepared for a 3-hour interview.
Maybe you do it another time. Do an ABC special.
Yeah, that's right. I want to fast forward to, you move to Sydney with Bob, you start to become an activist. A little bit against your own grain, because you were inclined to kind of think that this enthusiasm for being an activist that Bon had was about to, in your words, fling you off a cliff. All of a sudden, the ABC comes knocking and says, hey, how about a documentary? And that documentary would televise the very first same-sex kiss between a couple. Were you prepared for the impact that would have?
No idea. We were totally committed to be part of bringing about change. We were very naive, very naive, but totally committed to the cause, so to speak. And the activism was in our DNA, so to speak. And that's what we had no idea about the kiss. I think Neil Munro, who was the producer, he himself was gay with a bit in the closet, and I think he encouraged us to do it. And of course, if you look at it, it was just, a little cat on the lips. We had many, many better kisses.
A lot of young people today think of 1978, the very first Mardi Gras, being an explosion of progressivism for the rainbow community, when in reality, the advances were being made decades before that. You were a key part of that in Australia. You write in the book that you've written this to record a lesson for future generations to remain vigilant and to continue the fight for equality and justice, as history has shown how quickly progress can be reversed. Now, many people in the rainbow community today note the huge strides that have been made since your time, but also feel some significant regression in 2025. As someone who's been through the ups and downs of progress, what do you say to those people who are leading the movement now about how to cope and manage setbacks that many feel are taking place today?
Stay together, work together at the barricades of oppression. Working together as with a particular goal in mind to either maintain what we've got or maybe some more future changes. I think working together, being a united force for certain things, think that's how it works. To have comrades that you can, perhaps cry on the shoulder and say, it is bloody hard to do this, but let's do it together, and that makes the task much easier. So it's a sense of community, of belonging, of working together.
There's a mantra you repeat throughout the book, something that was in your mind from a very young age. And it goes something like this. It takes a few forms in the book, but it says, the world can be a better place. You recall that mantra in times of sadness, in times of hope. Tell me where that comes from and what it means to you today.
So during my childhood, we lived in a house just behind the house. The Nazis were testing the V2s, which were the very early rockets, of course, the rockets that are going to the moon today. They were testing those, and they were in very early stages. So they would go up, and we would hear the noise and never know, would they fall on our house, would they turn towards the North Sea. My mother, being the nurturer, when these things happened, she had told us we all needed to be together in her bedroom, sitting on her bed, and because if we were to go, we were to go together. But at the same time, Mother, for some, I don't know how she did this, she would hum music, sounds, or she would try and tell stories, perhaps to relieve her own fear, but also certainly to help us. She did debriefing, she did with us. She held us tight. At the same time, my dad, being a religious man, he would say something like, "Has thou forsaken us?" And then it would be followed by, "But the world can be a better place." That's where it comes from.
You speak about a spark of anger at the moment you decided you needed to be an activist. Rage is a powerful motivator. Where does it sit alongside forgiveness and deciding who is worthy of it?
With some people, I found forgiveness really difficult. With others, it depends on what has transpired. For example, what the Nazis did to me and to my folk and my family is something unforgivable. And things that are happening today, which resemble what happened in the 30s, these are unforgivable, these are inhuman. So, other people, whether perhaps more, lesser things, to talk about it perhaps, to each other and say, look, why did you do that? Or why? And let's sit together and face each other and say, can you explain it? And perhaps, we can reconcile.
I have a final question for you. There is an image I know in your mind that has replayed over and over again of a young Peter de Waal stepping off the SS Walia on your return to Australia that you remember. What do you say in your mind to young Peter about the life that you've had?
It's been an extraordinary life. I've had a lot of encouragement from Bob. At some stage, we had a 3-person relationship, and that was just absolutely extraordinary. Those 2 people, they were my later life mentors, so to speak. They encouraged me to do my higher school certificate. They helped me with writing my first essays. I've never written one. They supported me financially. because I came during the war. There was no education. I came to Australia. I could hardly speak English. I could write, read, but very poorly. So.
You've had an extraordinary life, Peter. Indeed. I remember the first time I met you, just in conclusion, I felt so compelled to come up to you and say thank you. Because the things that you've done for the community, the battles that you started fighting, are not over yet. And I know we had an embrace, and Ida Buttrose was right there, my former boss, and she was sort of looking at us and saying, this is a bit profound. And it was a really profound moment, and I know you've had that impact on countless people, and I hope you feel that and know that every day. Congratulations on putting together this chronicle of your life, of the times that we have lived in. It is an important part of history. So thank you and congratulations.